Doctor Who has always thrived on change. From the very beginning, the show was built on one radical idea: the Doctor never dies. The Doctor regenerates. A new face, a new voice, a new personality. Every time audiences thought they understood the character, the rules changed, and that change kept the series alive for over 60 years. But what happens when change itself becomes the battlefield? What happens when casting the Doctor wants a moment of excitement, anticipation, even celebration, transforms into a lightning rod for outrage? That's exactly where we are now. Because when the BBC revealed the most recent wave of casting decisions, actors who break from tradition, who redefine what the Doctor or their companions can look like, the internet ignited. Some fans cheered, others raged, and in the middle of this storm, one of the show's producers stepped forward with a bold statement. They didn't hedge, they didn't play it safe. Instead, they defended the choice directly, saying the casting was simply as it should be, 4 words. But those words carry weight. They cut through decades of tradition, fan wars, and cultural debate. They weren't just defending an actor. They were defending the very soul of Doctor Who. Because here's the truth most people don't want to admit: every regeneration, every companion, every shake-up has been met with resistance. When Patrick Troughton took over from William Hartnell, fans thought the show was finished. When Tom Baker left, the audience feared no one could replace him. When Jodie Whittaker stepped into the TARDIS, the backlash was deafening, not because she wasn't talented, but because some viewers couldn't accept the idea of a woman as the Doctor. And now with Ncuti Gatwa stepping into the role, the same cycle repeats. Some say he's too modern, too bold, too different. Others argue he's exactly what the show needs: vibrant, fearless, unafraid to redefine what the Doctor can be. That's why the producer's words matter, simply as it should be. Not a defense, a declaration. A reminder that the Doctor was never meant to be safe, that the Doctor's power lies in change, even when that change feels uncomfortable. Especially when it does. But here's where it gets deeper. Because defending casting isn't just about protecting actors from backlash. It's about fighting for the show's future. Doctor Who doesn't survive by repeating the past. It survives by evolving. And right now, with ratings under pressure, streaming deals collapsing, and fan communities divided, evolution isn't just a choice. It's the only path forward. The question is, will fandom accept that truth? Or will backlash drag the show into another dark age the way it did in the late 1980s? The producer has made their stance clear. The casting is right. The timing is right. And Doctor Who, whether fans like it or not, is moving into a new era. But as history shows, change always comes with a cost. And the hidden story behind this defense, the reason the BBC is standing so firmly now, may reveal just how fragile the future of Doctor Who really is. When the producer chose those 4 words, simply as it should be, they weren't just protecting one actor, they were sending a signal. A message not only to the fans, but to the entire entertainment industry watching Doctor Who right now. Because behind the scenes, there's more at stake than ever before. Think about the timing. The Disney deal, the one that was meant to catapult Doctor Who into the global streaming stratosphere, has collapsed. Ratings in the UK are fragile. Streaming figures abroad aren't as strong as hoped, and the BBC, still recovering from years of criticism over how the show has been handled, is desperate to prove one thing: that Doctor Who is still relevant, that it still matters. In moments like this, casting becomes more than casting. It becomes a statement of identity. It becomes a weapon. The producer knew the backlash was coming. They knew that casting choices, whether Ncuti Gatwa, Jodie Whittaker, or the newest companion, would light a fire online. And instead of running from that fire, they stepped directly into it. Why? Because Doctor Who has been here before. The backlash to Jodie's casting was one of the loudest storms in modern TV history. And the BBC, instead of owning the narrative, stayed silent, letting critics and trolls define the conversation. That silence nearly destroyed the goodwill around the show. This time they couldn't afford to repeat that mistake. So the defense came quickly, clearly, and with finality, as it should be. And here's where the deeper layer emerges. Because for the BBC, defending casting choices isn't just about representation or diversity or modern politics, it's about survival. The 1980s taught them a brutal lesson. When fandom fractures, when half the audience refuses to accept the Doctor, when critics sharpen their knives, when executives start to question whether the show still fits the brand, Doctor Who becomes vulnerable. Vulnerable to cancellation, vulnerable to exile, vulnerable to fading into nostalgia instead of leading the future. And so this time the BBC is fighting back. The producer's words were not spontaneous, they were strategic. The BBC is building a wall around their creative choices, drawing a line in the sand, and telling fans this is Doctor Who now. Take it or leave it. But here's the tension no one is acknowledging: what if the audience does leave? What if too many fans, disillusioned with modern changes, drift away? The Disney collapse proves one thing: the international audience is fickle. They won't stick around just because the BBC insists they should. That's why this defense feels different. It's not just about Ncuti Gatwa. It's not just about Jodie Whittaker. It's about the future Doctor, the next regeneration, the possibility that even bigger risks are coming. Because if Doctor Who is truly evolving into a new era, the casting choices so far might only be the beginning. And that is why the producer's words, as it should be, echo like both a promise and a warning. A promise that Doctor Who will not go back. A warning that resistance will not stop what comes next. But this raises the most dangerous question of all. If Doctor Who keeps moving forward, no matter how many fans it loses, then who is the show really for anymore? The real danger isn't in the casting itself, it's in what happens after. Because Doctor Who doesn't exist in a vacuum. It survives through its audience, its legacy, its ability to reinvent itself without losing the thread of what made it timeless. And right now, the BBC is gambling that the audience will accept whatever new face, whatever new identity, whatever new direction the show decides. But history tells us that gamble doesn't always pay off. Remember the Colin Baker era. Brilliant actor, divisive presentation. Fan split, ratings dipped, and suddenly a beloved national institution was on life support. The BBC suspended the show for 18 months. To the outside world, it looked like hiatus. Inside the industry, it was closer to death. What saved it? Not corporate strategy, not careful messaging. It was passion. A fan base that refused to let go. The same passion that later revived the show in 2005 and carried it to global recognition. That's why today's moment feels so fragile. The BBC may believe that defending casting so forcefully will strengthen the brand. But what if it has the opposite effect? What if fans feel silenced, dismissed, and abandoned? Passion doesn't survive in a vacuum. It needs dialogue, it needs trust. And right now, that trust is breaking. Because behind closed doors, conversations are happening that most fans never hear. Questions like, is Doctor Who still commercially viable without a Disney-sized partner? Can the BBC afford its ambitious spin-off plans if the international money dries up? And if ratings decline further, how long until executives start whispering the one word no fan wants to hear: cancellation? This is the context for the producer's words, simply as it should be. They aren't just defending an actor. They're defending the very idea that Doctor Who deserves to keep going, even if the numbers don't immediately justify it. But here's the darker twist. If the BBC ties the show's survival too closely to one interpretation, one vision, one creative statement, they risk repeating the mistakes of the past. If the audience rejects it, the whole structure collapses. And unlike the classic series, there may not be another 2005 revival waiting in the wings. So the future depends on one question: can Doctor Who find balance? Can it embrace evolution while still holding on to its essence? Can it bring in new audiences without burning the loyalty of the old? Because if it can't, then these 4 words may be remembered very differently. Not as a rallying cry, but as a warning carved into the final chapter of the Doctor's story. Simply as it should be, or simply the way it ends.